Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Sunday, July 27th, 2025, and floods in China and weather modification. There's a video I've got, and there's a guy talking about how China actually has university courses in weather modification, not meteorology, not reading the weather, but actively transforming the weather. And I thought, man, that's interesting, right? We're not nearly that advanced, and by we, I mean the West. EV mandate is going ahead in Canada. Auto industry be damned, says the minister, apparently. So, yay or not. We're going to be Cuba, right? North Cuba with gas-powered cars that are from the 90s. Have you got your Honda Civic ready? No information on the billions spent, so the Senate was asked to approve spending, I guess, and or maybe not approve spending, but the Senate has to look at the spending. And Carney offered no details on the billions of dollars he spent in 2025, and everybody just wants to pass it. So Denise Batters is pushing back against that. I've got that for you this morning. Ukraine denied aid money due to embezzlement. I'm shocked. Holy cow. Can you believe this? Embezzlement. Did you know they were embezzling? Yes, everybody knew. It was an open secret. They were driving around in the richest places in the fanciest cars, and everybody said, hey, isn't there a war in Ukraine right now? And then they drove off flipping people the bird. So what? Like, everybody knew that. Trump calls what's happening an invasion of Europe, right? So, wow, that's interesting. He uses the word invasion. So it's pretty wild and undeniable at this point. And we've got a lot of anti-Christian stuff to get to. Yesterday, I said the anti-Christian sentiment is rising. Today, it's almost undeniable that Canada has become an anti-Christian country, and that's a sad state of affairs to be in. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Squinty Noodle says, why is a Christian concert that's limited to a closed venue and at a specific time canceled over, quote, public safety concerns, but Palestine protests all over public streets happening at any random time of day, harassing Jewish people, and chance of death to fill in the blank, Canada, whoever else, are allowed, right? And again, not just harassing Jewish people, but harassing regular everyday people who just want to drive on a road and don't want to be interrupted by a bunch of people who are praying to their God inappropriately in the middle of the road. A Christian concert taking place in a church doesn't do that, right? Regular everyday people, not just these specific people, are impacted by this in a negative way, and yet they're allowed to continue, and the Christian concert is intolerable, absolutely intolerable. Do you have a permit? So Sean is heavily featured today in today's show, and there's an open invite. If he wants to come on Speaking Moistly, I'd love to chat with him about this anti-Christian sentiment. He said he's been all over Turkey and the Middle East. He said the strongest anti-Christian sentiment he's ever felt is in Canada. Are you surprised by that? I'm not. I can't say that I am surprised by that. But here's a meme, and Sean says, who did this? This is the CBC journalist throwing shade at another journalist saying, you don't need a permit to worship God in a church, lady. Like, what are you talking about? And she gave him this look, and somebody put devil horns on her and says, show me your permit to worship Jesus. And I think it's kind of funny. It's a funny little meme. And here is Pascal, and he says, on the right, Aldi C, he's a frequent public speaker in Montreal, known for saying things like, kill the Zionist aggressors, and praising Islamist terrorists as the good guys. Montreal has no issue with him. Isn't that weird? Isn't that strange how you can call to hurt a specific person or specific people generally and not face any pushback from places like Montreal? But on the left, Sean, a Christian singer who sings about love and peace, persona non grata in Montreal. This is the state of Canada right now. Oh, it's so much worse than that. It's so much worse than that. That would be like the sanitized version, right? It's even worse. The protests, the pro-Palestine protests, the Islam taking over the streets, that's all actually funded through the government by NGOs, right? All of this stuff we're funding through taxpayer money. Unfortunately, I wish it weren't so. Ryan says, does anyone have any footage of CBC swooping into these countless calls to prayer that have been blocking roads off and on for years, asking if they have a permit? Anyone? Yeah, that's what I thought. So these guys can operate without anybody saying, do you guys have a permit? Right? So they sit there and they block a street. Nobody on the CBC has an issue with them. Nobody's trying to interview the leader of this. That would be Islamophobic or something like that, which is a term used to shut down any criticism of people inappropriately taking over city streets to pray, which is not appropriate. And nobody in Canada would say, oh yeah, that's no problem. You should do that. Nope. Except for these guys who are doing it as a show of force to be honest with you. And so Dacey says, after spreading a narrative that incited a violent attack on a worship service in Montreal is going to try and find the church that was attacked. The city has also sent police ahead of the show in an attempt to intimidate the church and shut it down. The same police failed to protect the church when it was under siege and did nothing when it was smoke bombed. So Sean says, let me get this straight, Montreal. We'll read this one again. You canceled our permit for a peaceful outdoor worship gathering for no reason. You threatened a church on private property to not have church. You sent a battalion of police to intimidate us. Antifa throws 2 smoke bombs at my head inside the church. You do nothing. Now you want to fine the church for doing what the church does, worship. Every Canadian should be embarrassed and concerned with this. No bigger scandal in Canada. Yeah, I would definitely agree there, right? And Dacey's highlighting this impropriety, right? And CTV News says Montreal says it will fine church after MAGA superstar, Christian rock concert guy. I haven't heard him mention Trump once. Somebody said that his wife is involved, and there are things around him that maybe make him controversial. I don't think that any of his controversy is on display here. He's just hanging out doing songs and stuff. If you compare to the people shutting down streets and praying in front of churches in order to intimidate the churches and all of the rest of it, I don't think that, I think Canada's response is jaw-dropping, and I think that it should not be tolerated. The leadership should be held, brought to heel for this. Here is Dahlia. She says, you get fined $2,500 for hosting a peaceful Christian gathering in a church in Montreal, but if you're a masked mob trespassing on the church, tossing smoke bombs in it, threatening innocent people, please continue, right? The police did nothing about the guys who threw the smoke bomb at him. Is throwing smoke bombs at people bad? Should that guy maybe get arrested? Because he wasn't, as far as I understand it, right? But they gave the church a $2,500 fine. Wasn't even fined, right? Not even, I need to speak with you, sir. Sean says, for all those kind, generous people asking to help out in the fight, our expenses have been insane since all of this. The ways to donate are here, so you can donate to Sean there. And he says, and we will take care of the church fine while we fight it. So they're going to fight the fine and take care of the fine and so on and so forth. And so that's good news. Dacey says 2 days in a row, Palestinian pots and pan protesters have shut down the area around the Israeli embassy in Ottawa. They did the same thing in Montreal today. How long will this be allowed to continue? These people promote the narrative, and so they are supported, just like the people who did the rail blockades and lit things on fire and didn't on the railroad tracks, and that was seen as fine, right? No problems. Just like the people who pulled down statues, you're not allowed to pull down public property. That was seen as fine. Nothing happened to them. And just like Black Lives Matter, this is the new incarnation of that same protest, which has been paid for by the government the whole time through NGOs. So the government can claim, we don't know, we didn't know, we're just supporting good causes that Canadians support. And these, quote, good causes support all of this nonsense. For real. I wish I was wrong, but I'm not wrong. Jonathan K. is responding to John Robson. John says, our public affairs really are taking on a Soviet tinge. It's perfectly obvious Sean's being canceled because they don't like his views, so asking us to swallow the, quote, safety rationale is making us complicit in their lies as well as their censorship. Yeah, so the National Post is saying all six Canadian venues cancel Christian music Sean F's shows due to safety. Bullshit, right? It's not safety, it's... Jonathan K. says, I didn't think it was possible, but Canadian cancel culture authoritarians have somehow figured out a way to make us love Christian rock. Creed predated this by a long time. Okay, so everybody loved Creed. Just that one song, though. Dean says, why every evangelical church across Canada has a band playing on Sunday without a permit. Montreal's mayor is a fascist pig. And so here's more color on the $2,500 fine. The city of Montreal has fined a local church $2,500 for hosting a concert Friday night by the U.S.-based Christian music Sean F. The city says the church did not have a permit to organize the concert, which says it ran counter to Montreal's values of inclusion, solidarity, and respect. Wow. Officials have called Sean's scheduled concerts in several Canadian cities canceled, Sean's concerts in several Canadian cities, including Halifax, Charlottetown, and Quebec City. He has spoken out against gender ideology, abortion, and the LGBTQ plus community, and his religious and political views have grabbed the attention of President Donald Trump's administration. So he's praised by Trump, so we must destroy him. Welcome to Canada. Wild. Absolutely wild, right? So what's her name? Somebody's asking in the stream. What's her name? I don't know. I'm not sure the name of the Montreal mayor. Isn't it Sheinbaum? No, that's the president of Mexico. Shucks, missed it. Joe Warmington says, so we don't have free speech anymore. Quebec City cancels the concert of mega musician following lead of other Canadian cities. No, Joe, we haven't had free speech for a while, buddy. Randy Hillier is responding to the Toronto Star. Toronto Star is reporting that City of Vaughan has canceled concert set to feature mega superstar Christian rock guy, Sean. Officials said that the permit for the concert was denied on the basis of health and safety as well as community standards and well-being. Bullshit. And Randy says, Canada welcomes everyone to our country except Christians and whites. Yep, Sean's a double threat. He's Christian and white. Oh, man. Oh, no, right? Can't have that. Sean says, breaking, we have a Toronto venue calling all the bold believers and warriors to join us tomorrow night to take a stand. We've got some pretty big announcements. Doors open at 6 p.m. So that was tonight. That is tonight, 272 Atwell Drive at 6:30 p.m. if you want to go and hang out with Sean and see what's going on there. Darshan says Canada is in this alarming stage now where a Christian church needs a permit to hold a religious singing event, but Muslims can block major streets to pray for months on end, even block the path of an ambulance while the police look on as mute spectators. This won't end well. We're in the end game now, and this is going to switch to a different paradigm. All that's going to happen is this will become normalized. It is normalized. People don't go to church. People think church is weird. I don't go to church personally. Somebody asked me in the comments yesterday, do you go to church, Mark? I don't. I look at the mass being done at the churches that I think that I might want to bring myself to, because my immortal soul, I'm not going to trust it to some globalist hack. Okay. So I've listened to a bunch of sermons, and a lot of the time they dabble into places where I'm not comfortable going. And it's interesting because, well, I just haven't found anywhere that seems to actually be talking about God. Instead, they're talking about globalist nonsense. So it's frustrating and difficult to find somewhere that is trustworthy at this point in time, because I think that a lot of the places to do that, to worship properly, I guess, or to worship in the church, have been corrupted by globalism. And I also think that you don't need a church or a medium to have a personal relationship with God. And so maybe that answers your question, but maybe not. I try and keep up. But what happens is this doesn't end. It just switches into another paradigm. Here's an example, okay? It used to be that a $20 billion deficit at the federal level was big because the provincial deficit was $300 billion or something like that. So if you add the provincial and the federal, now you've got $400 billion, and it's okay. But now we've got $1 trillion worth of debt instead of a $20 billion deficit. And we've got a huge deficit as well. Hundreds of probably billions of dollars of deficit as well. And so we're in a different paradigm now. The conversation is a completely different conversation. We never fixed the $20 billion deficit. It just got so much worse that the conversations we were having around the $20 billion deficit don't make any rational sense now, because the deficit's many times greater than that. Many, many times greater than that. It's more than double, more than triple, many, many times greater than 20 billion. And so the debt is in a different paradigm now, right? And that's where we're going with our culture. It's just going to be normalized. It already is. And there isn't really a pathway back, because the church is corrupt to the point of almost uselessness. And I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to be rude to the church, but I'm saying a church that supports abortion blindly, a church that supports MAID, a church that supports a lot of these things that are being pushed by globalist policies at the federal level, is not a church that's adhering to the teachings of the Christian God that I understand. And so I can't look past that. I can't see past that. And I've talked with people who have watched their church change. Mel Gibson, listen to Mel Gibson. I mean, I'm not saying I talked to Mel Gibson, but I've talked to people I have heard Mel Gibson talk about it. But I've talked to people whose church has changed, and they've gone by the wayside. They're very devout people who continue to go to church often. And then They stopped because the church stopped talking to them about things that they wanted to hear from a church, and instead started talking to them about globalist garbage and indoctrinating them. And they stopped going. And so how do you deal with that, right? Because there's not a pathway back when the institution itself is corrupt. And so that's where we're at, unfortunately, right? And so it won't end. It's going to change to a different paradigm. And Christians are going to have to find themselves again and then offer something worthwhile. And then maybe the West will change, right? But at this point in time, globalist Christianity is just not going to do it. Sean continues, he says, I've led worship and preached in Africa, the Middle East, and all across the world in 2025. The most intense persecution was not in Iraq or Turkey, but Canada. Didn't have that on my bingo card. Yeah, shocking. I'm shocked. This is me being shocked. Here's Sean. He says, lawsuit incoming. Montreal fines local church for hosting mega-affiliated musician Sean. I don't think that he is mega affiliated. I just keep repeating what the news says. Dallas Brody, who's a BC One politician, interim leader of One BC, MLA, and so she's an elected official out in British Columbia. She says attacking worshipers is a hate crime. Burning churches is a hate crime. The blatant persecution of Christians within Canada must stop. And so Sean is talking about the officials. So he gets up to 5 officials, and one of the officials is a mayor of a smaller town around Montreal. And he says, you can come and play in any of my parks, permit free, no worries, come on in. So that's interesting. There's pushback there. Sorry, I don't have that one. That's on Sean's tweets. But Sean here has Andrew Lawton. Andrew Lawton's using the Parks and Rec meme of I think it's Ron Johnson. And he's got his oh, here's my permit. I can do what I want, Ron, right? So, yeah. And Sean says, we have our 5th elected official in Canada, also an MP backing us up. Let's go. We are closing in on 15,000 signatures at a Rebel News petition. So that's interesting there. And here is Table Salt. And Sean says, I've been in touch. He prayed with the Secretary of Homeland Security, Hegseth, or Secretary of Defense? Hegseth. In January, it's his pinned tweet. Okay, so he has connections up to the top, and Hegseth is going to tell Trump, right? This goes up to the top. So Sean says, I've been in touch with senior White House officials, and they're watching what is unfolding with blatant Christian persecution in Canada. We're keeping all receipts too. So yeah, pretty wild and crazy stuff going on in Canada, and same things going on in Paris, same things going on across the West. And Catholic Sat says twice in the last 48 hours, arsons have targeted the Church of Notre Dame in Paris. The deliberate attack on Catholic places of worship in France must stop. So it's not just Canada. It's not just one place that's doing this. It is many, many places that are doing this, and all across the West, indeed. And that's very, very concerning. Let's talk about free speech a little bit, and then I'm going to have to cut the stream. Free Speech Union says, for years, politicians promised the Online Safety Act would target only illegal content, protecting kids from porn, exploitation, and suicide forms without touching free speech. But from the moment the age verification checks took effect on the 25th of July, that reassurance began to unravel. Full details here. So the free speech is gone by the wayside. They're using this to censor people, and that's very, very clear now that the laws have changed and the laws are in place. Michael says USA versus EU censorship, and here is this guy.
If you're in Europe, you might not know this, but America and the EU are currently fighting. What are they fighting over, you ask? Freedom of speech. This has been going on for a while. A month or two ago, the EU pressured Ireland into adopting hate speech laws. America pushed back, but it has been since escalating. Just 10 days ago, this was posted. In Europe, one is free to speak, not free to spread illegal content. Which basically, if you can't understand that means you're allowed to say things as long as we allow you. So there isn't freedom. You'll see this a lot in comment sections. People will say freedom to speak, not freedom of consequence. And anyone that comments says, the irony doesn't register with them. If there's consequence, then there isn't freedom. Freedom would be if there was no consequence. It's the same as saying, look, you're free to go outside, but if you go outside, we'll arrest you. It's like, well, then what do you mean I'm free to go outside? You'll arrest me. No, you're free to go outside. It's just, we'll arrest you. It's like that doesn't make sense. That's not freedom. The Department of State in America posted this in response. In Europe, thousands are being convicted for the crime of criticizing their own governments. This Orwellian message won't fool the United States. Censorship is not freedom. It goes, all the DSA protects is European leaders from their own people. Pavel Durov, the owner of Telegram, then got involved. He said, this trend in the EU is alarming. I've seen German requests to prosecute users for merely criticizing government officials. Calling a politician a pig or a lizard is now treated as a crime. Telegram doesn't comply with such demands. We stand against political persecution. And we see that in Germany just a few weeks ago, where people were getting raided. Their house was getting raided because they called a politician a name online. We go back to, again, what they say. In Europe, one is free to speak, not free to spread illegal content. Funny that. And it has escalated further. The House...
So it is getting worse. And I said yesterday, I don't think that Trump is going to stop it. I don't think that he's going to fix it. But I would love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. Here is this woman. She's talking about U.S. aid and the amount of money that U.S. aid was funneling into all of the different entertainment that we are fed, basically. And the U.S. aid was propping up and giving what appeared to be the money that would usually be gotten from a well-supported show. So giving the appearance of a well-supported show, but it was all just U.S. aid money, right? So here's the U.S. aid's been cut off, and all of these other things have been cut off too.
I've been noticing a pattern emerging ever since U.S. aid finally closed its doors on July 1st. All of a sudden, the Democrats are running out of money. And it makes me wonder who exactly was paying for this national tour that AOC and Bernie were going on. Maybe all those private jets they were taking from state to state were getting a little too expensive. And just like the Democrats, Act Blue is also running out of money. And have you noticed that ever since USAID finally shut down that we don't see any more nationwide protests? Maybe all those printed signs and pamphlets and propaganda and this giant Trump baby balloon cost a little bit more than you thought, huh? Also, ever since USAID has shut down, shows are getting canceled left and right. First Stephen Colbert, then E! News. Now all of a sudden The View says that they're going on a hiatus. This is all getting to be a pretty weird coincidence, don't you think? Honestly, whatever the heck is going on, I'm just glad that it took The View with them, because those 5 women are insufferable and they have not had a valid take in years. Now, I'm not saying that correlation always leads to causation, but what I am saying is that I'm pretty good at pattern recognition, and there are a lot of things piling up that are showing me exactly where that money was coming from.
Yep, I think that that's not inaccurate, honestly. Kenzie calls it out, says, this is why Alberta needs an independent police force. Rupert is a UK MP, and he says, I've written to the Home Secretary about her reported plans to monitor, quote, anti-migrant sentiment on the internet through a dedicated elite police team. We must hold this dreadful government to account. And so they're going to... They have migrant gangs that are targeting British children for sexual assault and worse. And yet the people who they want to have an elite